That paralysis that grips you when conflict approaches is not cowardice, it's conditioning. For 2 millennia, slave morality has programmed you to fear confrontation, to choose submission over sovereignty. But when Nietzsche's philosophy meets Machiavelli's strategy, the spell breaks. Tonight, we break yours. Fallen King. I'm about to show you the hidden mechanism that's been running your life, and it's going to disturb you. Right now, there's a program executing in your mind. It whispers, don't make waves, keep the peace, be the bigger person. But this program has a creator, and its name is slave morality. Here's what they never told you. Your fear of conflict isn't natural, it's manufactured. Nietzsche exposed this conspiracy over a century ago. The weak, unable to assert their will directly, created a value system that painted confrontation as evil and submission as good. It's the greatest psychological operation in human history, and you're living proof of its success. But there's a second revelation that Machiavelli understood. Not all conflict is created equal. While slaves avoid all confrontation and fools seek every fight, the prince, the true sovereign, practices the dark art of strategic conflict. He knows fear, properly transformed, becomes the most potent weapon in his arsenal. Tonight, that changes. You're about to discover how the shadow alliance of Nietzschean courage and Machiavellian strategy creates something unprecedented. The ability to transform your deepest fear into your greatest strength. Fallen King. Let's examine the evidence of this psychological operation. Look at your own life. How many times this week have you bitten your tongue when someone crossed a boundary? How many microaggressions have you absorbed, telling yourself it's not worth the confrontation? Each instance is a data point in your subjugation. The program runs deeper than you imagine. Nietzsche called it resentment, that poisonous accumulation of unacted revenge, rotting in souls who cannot strike back. But this isn't just individual psychology, it's power distribution on a massive scale. Every person who fears conflict becomes a node in a network of compliance, silently supporting every tyrant who depends on that fear. Machiavelli saw this clearly. Men are simple and ready to obey present necessities. Your programmed necessity? Avoid conflict to survive socially. But whose interest does this serve? Not yours. It serves those who benefit from your silence, who grow stronger with every confrontation you avoid. This alliance of insights reveals something extraordinary. Your fear actively feeds the forces that oppress you. Here's where the common understanding of conflict fails, catastrophically. The masses believe confrontation is binary. You either fight or flee. You're either aggressive or passive. This simplistic thinking is exactly what keeps them enslaved. But the shadow alliance between Nietzsche and Machiavelli reveals a third way, the transformation of reactive emotion into calculated strategy. Consider Nietzsche's lion, roaring its sacred no against the dragon of imposed values. Most interpret this as mindless rebellion, but they miss the deeper teaching. The lion doesn't roar at every provocation. That would be exhaustion. Instead, it identifies the precise scales on the dragon that, when struck, will bring down the entire structure of oppression. This is where Machiavellian intelligence enters the equation. Machiavelli taught that the prince must be both fox and lion, but not simultaneously and never predictably. When you transform your fear of conflict into strategic thinking, you develop what I call predator consciousness. You begin to see confrontations not as threats to avoid, but as opportunities to architect your sovereignty. You learn to read the hidden power dynamics in every interaction, to identify when showing teeth serves you, and when concealing them multiplies your power. Here's the revolutionary insight. Your accumulated resentment that poison Nietzsche warned about can be transmuted into intelligence. Every slight you've swallowed has taught you about power. Every boundary violated has shown you where the weak points lie. The slave sees only humiliation. The emerging sovereign sees a masterclass in human nature. This transformation from reactive victim to strategic actor is the first metamorphosis in your journey from slave to king. Now, we arrive at the diamond core of the Shadow Alliance, the revelation that will fundamentally alter how you perceive every human interaction. The secret is this: strategic conflict is not about winning battles, it's about becoming ungovernable. This is where Nietzsche's will to power fuses with Machiavelli's political genius to create something entirely new. Let me paint you a picture of what ungovernable looks like. When you master strategic conflict, you become psychologically impossible to dominate. Not through brute force, that's the amateur's path, but through a sophisticated dance of calculated responses. Sometimes you confront directly, delivering consequences with such precision that boundary crossers think twice. Other times, you employ what Machiavelli called beneficial cruelty, a single, decisive action that prevents 1,000 future conflicts. And sometimes your power lies in strategic silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of one who chooses their battles with sovereign discretion. The transformation happens at the nervous system level, where once conflict triggered your freeze response, that ancient mammalian submission, you develop what I call the sovereign pause. In that pause, you're not paralyzed by fear. You're calculating. Which response serves my long-term sovereignty? Will confrontation here create the precise effect I need? Or does power lie in a different approach? This pause is where the slave dies and the strategist is born. But here's the deepest cut. Becoming ungovernable doesn't mean becoming unlikable or isolated. Machiavelli knew that the prince must be feared when necessary, but never hated. When you wield strategic conflict with skill, you create something more valuable than love. You create respect. People learn that you cannot be pushed, cannot be manipulated, cannot be made to betray yourself. They adjust their behavior accordingly. The boundaries you've struggled to maintain suddenly maintain themselves because everyone knows this one has a teeth, and more importantly, knows exactly when and how to use them. Fallen King, prepare yourself for an uncomfortable truth that most who preach empowerment will never tell you. The path of strategic conflict carries a price, one that Nietzsche understood in his bones and Machiavelli accepted with cold clarity. As you transform from sheep to sovereign, you will lose people. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Here's what happens when you begin wielding strategic conflict. The entire ecosystem of your relationships transforms. Those who benefited from your silence react with confusion, then anger, then attempts to restore the old order. They'll call you selfish, say you've changed, mourn the old you who is so much easier to control. Machiavelli warned that men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony, and your compliance was their inheritance. But the deeper reframe, what you're losing aren't relationships, but transactions. These people never loved you, They loved your usefulness, your malleability, your reliable submission. The moment you demonstrate strategic sovereignty, masks fall. This is Nietzsche's gift, the ability to see clearly who feeds on your fear versus who genuinely respects your being. The sorting happens automatically, ruthlessly, and can be profoundly lonely at first. Yet from this apparent darkness comes liberation. Relationships that survive your transformation are forged in truth rather than need. When you become ungovernable, you discover who values your authentic presence versus who is exploiting your programmed compliance. The kingdom you build may be smaller, but every alliance within it is real. Here arrives the paradox that shatters conventional understanding, a truth so profound that even Nietzsche and Machiavelli only glimpsed its edges. The ultimate mastery of strategic conflict leads not to more confrontation, but to its near complete disappearance. This is the cosmic joke. When you truly master the dark art, you rarely need to use it. Picture this metaphysical mechanism. As you embody strategic sovereignty, you emanate what I call the predator's peace. It's the energy an apex predator carries. Not aggressive, not threatening, simply dangerous when necessary. Others sense this and adjust automatically. No confrontation needed. The mere potential for strategic conflict becomes more powerful than its execution. This is where spiritual meets strategic. Nietzsche's Übermensch doesn't spend days fighting. He's transcended through presence. Machiavelli's prince doesn't constantly wield power. His reputation does. When you integrate both teachings, you discover conflict mastery means creating reality where conflict becomes unnecessary. The twist. This isn't about becoming hard. The sovereign who's mastered strategic conflict can afford genuine openness, even vulnerability, because everyone knows these are choices, not weaknesses. We stand at the threshold where all paths converge, where slaves' fear transforms into sovereign's freedom. You began believing confrontation was your enemy. Now you see it as teacher, refiner, path to psychological sovereignty. The synthesis. Nietzsche gave permission to roar. Machiavelli taught when to whisper. Together, they've shown how to transform fear into royal intelligence. Strategic conflict isn't about domination. It's about becoming psychologically impossible to dominate. But here's the final threshold: implementation. Knowledge without action is sophisticated slavery. Life will test you immediately. Someone will count on your old compliance. In that moment, you'll feel ancient fear rise. But now, within that fear, you'll also feel the sovereign pause, the strategic mind awakening, the shadow alliance coming online. Fallen King, let us draw back the final veil and see the complete architecture of your transformation. You arrived believing your fear of conflict was personal failing, weakness to be ashamed of. But we've exposed something far more profound. You've been living under a spell, a 2,000-year-old psychological operation designed to keep potential sovereigns in chains. The revelation cuts deep. Every time you thought you were being mature by avoiding conflict, you were executing someone else's program. Every swallowed word wasn't wisdom, it was submission. Every boundary you failed to defend wasn't kindness, it was complicity in your own diminishment. The slave morality Nietzsche exposed hasn't just influenced your behavior, it has been ruling your entire existence from the shadows. But now the spell is broken. Through the shadow alliance of Nietzschean courage and Machiavellian strategy, you've seen how fear transmutes into power, how resentment becomes intelligence, how the very conflicts you've avoided are doorways to sovereignty. You understand strategic conflict isn't about becoming a tyrant. It's about becoming ungovernable, psychologically impossible to dominate. The true revelation: The throne of your inner kingdom has always been yours. No one took it. You've been programmed to abdicate it, moment by moment, conflict by avoided conflict. Sovereignty isn't granted by others or found in distant futures. It's reclaimed in each present moment when you choose strategic action over programmed compliance. What seemed like curses, your sensitivity to conflict, accumulated resentments, deep awareness of power dynamics, these are actually gifts. They've been preparing you for transformation. Every slight endured taught you about power. Every boundary violated showed where to build walls. The slave in you took notes. Now the sovereign acts on that intelligence. The hour of decision has arrived. You now possess the philosophical weaponry of titans. Nietzsche's lightning and Machiavelli's precision merged into a single blade. But knowledge without embodiment is merely sophisticated slavery. Your calling is this: transform every moment of potential conflict into conscious choice. When fear rises, and it will, remember that within it lies your power. The sovereign pause, that space between stimulus and response, is where transformation lives. In that pause, you're not deciding whether to fight or flee. You're calculating which response serves your sovereignty. Begin with small acts of calculated courage. When someone crosses a boundary, practice your new art. Feel the fear, acknowledge the programming, then choose from strategy rather than reaction. Watch how the world adjusts to your new frequency. Those who fed on your compliance will react with confusion, then respect, then either transformation or departure. Remember, this path isn't about becoming cruel. True sovereignty affords authentic kindness because it flows from choice, not compulsion. When you know you can bare teeth, your smile carries the weight of genuine power. Fallen King, as our shadows part in this liminal hour, you stand transformed, no longer silent sufferer, but architect of sovereignty. The crown once tarnished in fear's dust now gleams with strategic power. Remember, every avoided conflict feeds tyranny. Every strategic confrontation forges your crown. You're not choosing between peace and war. You're choosing between slaves' false peace and sovereign's authentic power. Go now, armed with the Shadow Alliance. Transform fear into fuel, resentment into intelligence, conflicts into conscious creation. The throne awaits in the next moment you choose strategy over submission. Become who you are, Fallen King.